Hi, my name is Richard Slawson. I'm an estate planning attorney and I suffer from social anxiety. Social anxiety is more than just feeling shy and uncomfortable around people. It is a medical condition that causes intense fear of being closely watched, judged, or criticized by others in social situations. Originally, I'd planned this talk as a way of finding people who would hire my firm to create estate plans for them. But it became more than that for me. As I reviewed my life, I discovered that despite my difficulties of social anxiety, I had many successes in my life. And more surprising than that, I found that social anxiety helped me develop talents and personal strengths. What I thought was my greatest weakness turned out to be a force that helped me to be my best. My hope is that as you listen to this speech, you will realize that your weaknesses can become your strengths. It is difficult for someone who doesn't have social anxiety to understand what it is like to live with social anxiety. Perhaps a few themes from my life will demonstrate the challenges that come with social anxiety. I entered college as a theater major. I had starry-eyed dreams of playing on Broadway or winning an Oscar. So when the first production was announced, William Shakespeare's King Lear, I knew I had to get a part in it. I decided to choose a small role, reasoning that if I did well in a small part, I would stand out and have a better chance of getting cast in the play. So I chose the part of the King of France, one of the suitors of King Lear's daughter Cordelia. I memorized my scene, signed up for an audition, and marched into the audition room. It was full of students, many of whom had already been cast in major roles. The director sat at one end of the room, and he looked surprised at my choice of audition material, but told me to read my scene with Jennifer, the student who had been cast as Cordelia. Well, adopting as regal a position as I could, I began my scene. I was vaguely aware of a growing tension in my body. My throat tightened. Every light seemed brighter. Every noise seemed sharper. Then suddenly I realized the fatal flaw in my choice of audition material. Making a declaration of love in front of all those people to the most beautiful actress in the department caused explosions of terror within me. I sputtered out my first few lines, and then my mind went blank. Jennifer tried to feed me my lines, but that just made my anxiety worse. Frankly, I don't even remember if I finished the scene. Needless to say, I was not cast in that production. At that time, I didn't know I had social anxiety. I didn't even know what social anxiety was. All I knew is that when I talked to someone I didn't know, I felt like I was surrounded by a crowd of angry people, pointing their fingers at me and telling me how stupid I was. Every encounter with social anxiety left me feeling drained, isolated, and alone. It was more than 20 years after that awful audition before I was diagnosed with social anxiety. Before that, I rarely talked about how I felt. I just felt like I was shy, awkward, and a social failure. Even after my diagnosis, I didn't talk about my fears, not even to my wife Karen, even though she knew what I was going through. It's easy to tell how social anxiety could make me feel like a failure. Most people I knew had no trouble meeting and talking with other people, while those things created a genuine fear within me. But my feelings of failure extended far beyond just meeting people. I just felt I wasn't strong enough to be successful in life. As an example, one summer during high school, I discovered that the Vancouver Playhouse, a professional theater company in the city where I lived, was offering summer jobs. They're nothing particularly interesting of the jobs. They were just phoning up season ticket holders and trying to get them to resubscribe. But I would be working in the theater. I would be part of something I loved. But when it came to a time to apply, I couldn't enter the office and write an application. I saw my other friends getting employed easily, and I had no other conclusion to make but that I was a failure. My experiences with social anxiety are not unique. There's a history of social anxiety in my family. My grandfather was one of 4 brothers, the only one who got married. His older brother fled to the isolation of Alaska. His younger brother remained a confirmed bachelor for 75 years of his life. His youngest brother, my great-uncle Mike, spent the last few years of his life in the Southwest during the Great Depression. He dropped out of school, was institutionalized for nearly a year, and worked sporadically until he died, drowning in Lake Mead at the age of 29. Mike didn't have a will, and even though he had few possessions, it took my grandfather over a year to settle his estate. Social anxiety is a problem of the modern era. Before the Industrial Revolution, a person like me would rarely encounter strangers. I would have grown up in a small rural community where I knew everyone. I would have lived with my extended family, parents, grandparents, perhaps aunts and uncles and cousins. I would rarely have traveled more than a few miles away from my village. My courtship and marriage would have been arranged ahead of time to someone I already knew. I would have followed my parents' occupation or been apprenticed to a tradesman. I would have had little opportunity to deal with strangers. In today's modern mobile society, I constantly have to deal with strangers. I've moved several times, each time having to get to know a new set of neighbors and associates. Modern job hunting and dating threw me into a sea of strangers. Each of these situations increased my anxiety and made my life more difficult. In a society that prizes social interaction, my lack of social skills made me feel alone, isolated, and a failure. One of the challenges caused by my social anxiety is procrastination. It's not the I'll get around to it sometime procrastination. It's the how do I get out of this procrastination? When I had to go talk to someone I didn't know, I felt a growing sense of dread within me. Rather than dealing with those feelings, I just wait until it's too late to talk to the person. This is why I never dated in high school and very rarely in college. It was just too easy to wait until it was too late to ask a girl out. Many times I'd sit at the phone, dial up a girl's phone number to the very last digit, then wait till the automated voice told me my call had not gone through, and hang up. Even after I fell madly in love with my wife Karen, the procrastination continued. Before our first kiss, I sat in her car for more than half an hour in silence. I wanted to kiss her. I thought she wanted to kiss me. But I waited and waited, making her late for her family reunion. Finally we kissed, and for some reason she thought that endearing, and eventually she accepted my sputtering proposal. Karen loves me despite my weaknesses, and together we've raised 2 sons who are good and honorable men. When I'm in a social situation with people I don't know, I feel the physical symptoms of social anxiety. Just like in that awful edition, my muscles tense, my throat tightens, my senses heighten. While others gather in groups to converse, I flee into the safety of an empty space. I imagine that if I interrupt their conversation that they'll be angry at me or simply ignore me. I imagine that they'd snicker derisively at anything I say, even to the point of telling me I didn't know what I was talking about. My fight or flight response goes into high mode, but I don't want to fight, I just want to flee. Even in the best of situations, I fear that I will lose control of the conversation. When I'm talking to someone I don't know, my mind is filled with unanswerable questions. What should I say? How will they react? Will they laugh at me? Will they be angry at me? Or will they simply ignore me? And even a friendly reply sends my mind whirling. What am I going to say to them? And then, how will they respond again? The cycle begins again. In the worst situations, I may have a panic attack. Fortunately, these are very few. I've come to be very good at avoiding social situations where my anxiety goes out of control. But sometimes, after a long day of avoiding social interaction, if I find myself in a noisy, crowded room with people I don't know, and someone comes up to talk to me, my anxiety can grow to a fear that's close to terror. I pull into myself. I put my head down, fix my eyes to the floor, pull my shoulders in. My throat tightens that I can hardly speak. My mind goes blank. I rub my forehead in a vain attempt to restart my brain. I sit in dumb silence or blurt out the first thing that comes to mind. And if somebody comes to try to comfort me, I just feel more frightened. Telling me that everything will be all right just reminds me that I'm terrified. I just want to get away and flee. It's taken me a while to realize that social anxiety has actually helped me develop talents and skills. For example, I became a better student. I had more time to study because I didn't waste my time with the distractions of social activities. I liked being alone in the library because I knew that books would never criticize me. I found writing stimulating because I could put down what I wanted to say, and if it wasn't right, I could change it. I also discovered that I enjoy public speaking. While some studies suggest that some people fear public speaking more than they fear death, I found public speaking liberating. Gone was the uncertainty of personal interaction. I could plan what I was going to say. I could polish it, add clever witticisms. I knew what I was going to say, when I was going to say it, and how I was going to say it. I discovered that I enjoyed teaching. I seem to have been born to teach. My second grade teacher commented that one of my classmates said that her favorite thing in class was listening to Richard talk. When my parents visited my middle school math class, they heard some of the students tell the teacher, "Let Richard explain it so we can understand it." I find it easy to be in control when I'm in a teaching situation. I know what I'm going to say. I know what I want to teach my students. And being a teacher comes with an aura of authority. The teacher is supposed to know what more than the students. And I find it easy to talk to my students, to share my intellectual discoveries with them. I find nothing more exciting in my career than watching the light of comprehension ignite in the eyes of a student. When I act, I don't feel stage fright. Because of the script, the director, the rehearsals, I know what I'm going to say, when I'm going to say it, and most importantly, how people are going to react to me. I'm also shielded from the audience by the third wall, a theatrical fiction that allows me to avoid the audience while still letting through the gratification of laughter and applause. And finally, when I'm on stage, I'm not myself. The insecurities and weaknesses that are on stage are not mine, they're my character's. Any anger or derision that's directed at my character, not at me. The security I felt on stage made me major as a theater major in college. Despite my disastrous King Lear audition, I soon found it easy to get to know the faculty and the students in my small theater department. I acted in student productions. I made friends. I even met my wife, whom I cast as a 60-year-old Irish peasant in a play. She said that I cast her like that so I would get to know what she'd look like when she got older. But actually, I cast her in the part so that we'd spend time together without the anxiety of having to ask her out. After graduation, there was new anxiety. I realized that I didn't have the talent or the drive to go into theater professionally, so I tried to market my skills to other professions. I thought I did well in job interviews, but I guess my anxiety came through, and the best offer I got was mowing lawns at a golf course. Eventually I decided I had to do something that I knew I could do well: go back to school. I studied at graduate schools in Canada and Texas, hoping for a career in teaching in college. But still, I was troubled with my social anxiety. Each school was full of people I did not know. I was forced out of a directing program when I found it difficult to direct actors I did not know. So I changed my major to theater history. I did well in that because I spent most of my time alone in the library doing research and writing. But after graduation, I was still stymied by my social anxiety. I went to conferences, but found it impossible to network with people who might find me a job. My job interviewing skills were still lacking, and I ended up not teaching at a college, but working at low-paying jobs, such as proofreading phone books. Again, I decided I had to do something I knew I could do, and go back to school, this time to law school. In the spirit of full disclosure, I'd like to say that my wife went to law school first, and without her influence I wouldn't have gone. I was accepted at New York University Law School, which boasted a 100% placement of its graduates. But the classes were large, and I knew no one, and my social anxiety reared its head again. In one small discussion class, I didn't open my mouth once for more than 3 weeks. Finally, I sought professional help, and at the age of 40 was diagnosed with social anxiety. True to their promise, I graduated from New York University with a job, the first time in my college career. But I found working at a law firm extremely nerve-wracking. I found it difficult to ask other attorneys, especially partners, for more work. And I wasn't able to bring new clients into the firm because I wasn't able to socialize in parties. I tried several different legal careers, ending up doing mainly document review, where I would look at corporate emails and documents trying to find relevant information. It was only slightly less boring than proofreading phone books. Finally, my wife and I decided we needed to form our own firm. We decided on practicing estate planning. It was a good choice for someone with social anxiety. I just met with a few clients at a time. I didn't worry that my clients would criticize me because they had come for my help. I knew what I was going to do. I knew the various ways to plan an estate. I knew how to help my clients get what they needed in their estate plan. In fact, My experiences with social anxiety let me sympathize with my clients' reluctance to plan for their estates, something that I call estate planning anxiety. I understand why it's difficult for some people to try to start their estate planning, because it deals with important questions, personal questions of people's lives and deaths. One example of estate planning anxiety are those who simply ignore it, thinking they do not need a will or a trust. Others procrastinate. They may put it on their mental to-do list, they may find an attorney, they may even fix a date to call up and make an appointment, but when that day comes they find there's just too many other things to do in the day. And then there are those who have a growing nervousness about thinking about estate planning. They become so concerned about it that they never even make an estate, never plan for the future of their families. Now it is important to overcome estate planning anxiety, especially for parents with small children. Without an estate plan, the courts will appoint guardians for their children. Court-appointed guardians may not have the best interests of the children at heart and may generate administrative costs that will eat away at the assets the parents have left for their children. A good estate plan will allow the parents to choose guardians who will take care of their children and do the best by them. Parents with older children also need to overcome estate planning anxiety. The education of older children may be compromised by creditors or people who want to take advantage of a young person's inheritance. Some older children may not be mature enough to deal with all their inheritance at once. They may want to buy fancy cars or expensive clothes or show their friends a good time. A well-made trust with a trustee who has the child's best interest in heart can save those assets until the child is mature enough to use them themselves. Adult children often find themselves in conflict over interest in the estate. Sometimes it's something that is just very simple, something with a sentimental value, like who gets the watercolors that mother painted in the community education class, which child gets the cherished knick-knack, or who gets father's model train set. With a good estate plan, while the parents are still alive, can respond to these children's concerns and reduce the amount of bad feelings in the family. Without an estate plan, special needs children may not have the financial, medical, or emotional support that they need once their parents have gone. With instruments like a special needs trust, parents can plan for their child's future and provide the assets that they need to have a good quality of life. It's been a long and often difficult journey from that day I fell apart in the audition room until I've had this opportunity to speak with you. It took me nearly 40 years to realize that my greatest failing was actually a treatable condition and not a character flaw. And even longer to realize that social anxiety was not just fear, but a force to create talents and personal strengths. I hope you've come to the same realization tonight. It is our challenge to look at our weaknesses and those of others in different light. If we look at our weaknesses as pathways to strength, then they will become the power to be our best. Thank you.